Betty hadn't expected to end Christmas Eve with a stranger's breath warm against her ear, but life had a twisted sense of humor lately. "Pretend you're my wife," the voice murmured, velvet smooth with an Italian accent that could melt ice sculptures. "And dance with me." She froze, her fingers tightening around the stem of her champagne flute. The Grand Belmont Hotel's ballroom blurred into a kaleidoscope of twinkling lights and designer gowns, but all she could focus on was the man standing beside her table, tall, dark-haired, and wearing danger like a second skin. This is how horror movies start, she thought, her pulse hammering against her ribs. Single mom gets murdered at fancy hotel because she couldn't afford therapy and came to a Christmas gala alone instead. But she didn't move. Couldn't move. Because Gilberto Arcuri, and somehow she knew that was his name before he'd even said it, had eyes that pinned her in place like a butterfly under glass. "I don't dance with strangers," Betty managed, proud that her voice came out steady despite the fact that her heart was attempting a jailbreak through her chest. "Then it's fortunate we're about to become very well acquainted." His hand extended toward her, broad and scarred across the knuckles. A hand that had clearly seen violence. "Please. I need you." Need. The word landed between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Betty's internal monologue went into overdrive. "Okay, so mysterious Italian man with cheekbones that could cut glass needs me to pretend to be his wife. Normal Tuesday. Totally normal. Except it's Christmas Eve and I'm wearing a clearance rack dress that I bought 3 years ago. And he looks like he stepped out of a cologne commercial directed by Martin Scorsese. She should say no. She should absolutely, definitively say no. But Betty had spent the last 5 years playing it safe, working double shifts, reading bedtime stories, being responsible, being invisible. And tonight, for the first time since her husband died, she dressed up, hired a sitter, and decided to feel human again. To feel seen. The universe apparently had taken that as a challenge. "Why me?" she asked, finally meeting his gaze. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, and held shadows. She recognized the kind that came from loss, from fighting battles no one else could see. A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Because everyone else in this room is afraid of me." "Well, that's not ominous at all." "And you think I'm not?" Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "I think you're the only woman here brave enough to sit alone at a table meant for 12 and not apologize for taking up space." Betty blinked. That was oddly perceptive, and maybe a little too accurate for comfort. Around them, the string quartet shifted into a slow waltz. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the ballroom, where couples swayed in practiced elegance. Everyone looked like they belonged in a fairy tale. Betty felt like she'd wandered onto the wrong movie set. "One dance," she heard herself say. "And then you explain why you need a fake wife." Gilberto's lips curved, not quite a smile, but close enough to make her stomach flip. "Deal." His hand closed around hers, and Betty felt the heat of his palm even through her skin. He guided her onto the dance floor with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no, one hand settling at the small of her back with possessive certainty. The moment they began moving, Betty realized she'd made a critical miscalculation. This wasn't just a dance. This was a claiming. If you are enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more thrilling mafia romance tales. Now, I have to ask. If a mysterious, handsome stranger asked you to dance at a Christmas dinner, would you say yes? Tell me in the comments below, and don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far our viewers are spreading the holiday vibes. Gilberto held her close, closer than strangers should be, closer than was proper, and moved with the fluid grace of someone who understood violence and elegance in equal measure. His cologne was cedar and smoke, expensive and dangerous, and she could feel the hard planes of his chest against her with every step. "You're tense," he murmured, his breath stirring her hair. "You're holding me like I might run. Will you?" Betty tilted her head back to meet his eyes. "Haven't decided yet." That almost smile appeared again, and this time she saw something else beneath it. Loneliness. Raw and aching and quickly hidden behind walls of steel. Oh no, she thought. He's not just dangerous, he's human. What's your name? Gilberto asked, his thumb tracing small circles against her spine through the fabric of her dress. Betty. She hesitated, then added, Stella Betty Ford, but everyone calls me Betty. Betty. He said it like he was tasting wine, testing the weight of it. It suits you. Strong. Classic. Unpretentious. Is that Italian for cheap dress and clearance shoes? His eyes darkened with something that might have been amusement. It's Italian for beautiful. Her breath caught. Don't fall for it. Don't you dare fall for it, Betty Ford. This man is trouble wrapped in Armani and held together with murder. But her traitorous body was already leaning into him, already sinking to his rhythm like they'd been dancing together for years instead of minutes. You still haven't explained the fake wife thing, she said, desperate to break whatever spell was weaving between them. Gilberto's jaw tightened. His gaze flicked over her shoulder, scanning the room with the practiced vigilance of a predator. There are men here tonight who would use any perceived weakness against me. A woman I care about would be a target. So you picked a random stranger to play the part? That's your master plan? I picked the woman who was brave enough to come to this dinner alone. His hand pressed more firmly against her back, drawing her closer. The woman who sat at that table with her chin up and her shoulders back, daring the world to judge her. That's not random, Betty. That's calculated. She should be insulted, should be angry that he'd been watching her, analyzing her. Instead, she felt something warm and dangerous unfurl in her chest. And what if I say no? Gilberto's expression shifted, went from commanding to something almost vulnerable. Then I walk away, and you never see me again. The music swelled around them, violins and cellos weaving a melody that felt like longing given sound. Other couples spun past in a blur of jewels and silk, but Betty barely noticed. Her entire world had narrowed to the man holding her, to the way his heart beat against hers, steady and strong. One dance, she repeated. Then I go back to my table. One dance, he agreed. But they both knew it was a lie. Because as they moved together beneath the crystal chandeliers, as his hand tightened possessively at her waist and her fingers curled into the fabric of his jacket, something fundamental shifted between them. Recognition? Maybe. Or inevitability. I'm going to regret this, Betty thought. But she didn't pull away, and when Gilberto leaned down, his lips brushing her ear as he whispered, Thank you, Mowgli Mia, my wife, she felt the words settle into her bones like a promise, or a curse. The music ended. The room erupted in polite applause, but neither of them moved. Gilberto's hand remained at her back. Betty's pulse continued to race, and somewhere across the ballroom, a flash went off bright and jarring. Someone had taken their picture. Gilberto's entire body went rigid. His eyes, those dark, fathomless eyes, turned cold and lethal in the space of a heartbeat. The warmth drained from his expression, replaced by something that made Betty's survival instincts scream. Get behind me, he said quietly. Now. What? Now, Betty? His tone left no room for argument. Betty stumbled back, her heart suddenly thundering for an entirely different reason. Across the ballroom, a man in a dark suit stood near the exit, lowering a camera. He met Gilberto's gaze and smiled slow, cruel, and deliberate. Then he disappeared into the crowd. Gilberto turned to her, his expression carved from stone. I need to get you somewhere safe. Safe from what? Betty's voice came out higher than she intended. Who was that? Someone who just made you a target. His hand found hers again, but this time there was no romance in the gesture. Only urgency. Stay close to me, don't let go, and whatever happens next. He never finished the sentence. Because that's when the lights went out. The darkness lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds of Betty's heart slamming against her ribs while Gilberto's arms locked around her like a cage. 3 seconds of screams echoing through the ballroom and the sharp click of weapons being drawn. 3 seconds of wondering if this was how she died in a clearance dress, at a Christmas gala, in the arms of a stranger who'd promised her safety. Then the emergency lights flickered on, bathing everything in harsh red. Stay behind me, Gilberto commanded, his voice gone cold and lethal. "Don't move, don't speak." Betty's survival instincts warred with her stubborn refusal to be helpless. "What's happening?" "Not now!" He scanned the ballroom with predatory focus, his body coiled like a weapon ready to strike. "We need to leave, immediately." He didn't wait for her agreement. His hand found hers, fingers threading through with surprising gentleness despite the urgency, and he pulled her toward the side exit with the confidence of someone who'd mapped every escape route before entering the room. Around them, chaos reigned. Hotel security shouted orders, guests huddled in clusters, some crying, others on their phones. The ice swan lay shattered on the floor, glittering like scattered diamonds in the emergency lighting. Betty's heels clicked against marble as Gilberto navigated them through the panic with practiced ease. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you're getting right now." He glanced back at her, his expression softening for just a moment. "Trust me, Betty. Please." There's that word again. Trust. They burst through a service door into a corridor lined with industrial lighting and the smell of commercial kitchens. Staff members pressed themselves against the walls as Gilberto passed, their eyes wide with something that looked like fear and recognition. "They know him," Betty realized. They all know him. "Gilberto," she said, digging her heels in and forcing him to stop. "I need you to tell me what's happening before I take another step, because right now, you look less like a concerned citizen and more like..." "Like what?" He turned to face her fully, and in the harsh fluorescent light, he looked dangerous, beautiful, and terrible, and absolutely lethal. "Say it. Like someone who expected this." Something flickered across his face. Respect, maybe, or acknowledgement. "I didn't expect the blackout. But the rest?" He stepped closer, crowding her space in a way that should have felt threatening but somehow didn't. "Yes. I expected trouble tonight. That's why I needed you. As a human shield? As camouflage." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, a gesture so at odds with the violence of the moment that it made her dizzy. "The men who came here tonight were looking for me. Alone I'm a target. With you?" His eyes locked onto hers. "With you, I'm just a man dancing with a beautiful woman, unremarkable, forgettable. I hate to break it to you, but you're the opposite of forgettable." That almost smile appeared. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Making jokes when you're terrified." Betty's laugh came out shaky. "Well, you're doing that intense smoldering thing again, so we're even." A door slammed somewhere behind them, voices harsh, urgent, speaking rapid Italian. Gilberto's expression hardened instantly. "We're out of time." He pulled her forward, moving faster now, through a maze of service corridors that all looked identical. "There's a private elevator at the end of this hallway. It goes directly to my penthouse. We'll be safe there." "Your penthouse?" "In this hotel. My family owns it." "Of course they do." "And your family is?" "Complicated." They reached the elevator, sleek, modern, requiring a keycard that Gilberto produced from inside his jacket. The doors opened with a soft chime that felt obscenely civilized given the circumstances. The moment they stepped inside and the doors closed, Betty's legs nearly gave out. She sagged against the mirrored wall, adrenaline draining from her system and leaving her shaky and cold. "Breathe," Gilberto said softly, pressing a button marked P. "You're safe now." Safe is relative when someone just cut the power to a building full of people. Betty pressed her hands against her face. "This is insane. I'm insane. I should have gone home when I had the chance. But you didn't." He moved closer, and Betty could feel the heat of him even through the space between them. "Why?" "Because, apparently I have terrible survival instincts and a death wish disguised as curiosity. Or because you felt it too." Betty's hands dropped. "Felt what?" Gilberto's expression was raw, unguarded in a way it hadn't been on the dance floor. "The pull. The recognition. Like finding something you didn't know you were looking for." Her breath caught. "Oh, this is dangerous." This is so much more dangerous than the blackout or the mysterious men or any of it. Asterisk. You don't know me, she managed. I know you came to that dinner alone. I know you ordered champagne but barely drank it. I know you watched everyone else dance and didn't allow yourself to look sad about it. His hand came up, slowly, giving her time to refuse. When she didn't, he cupped her jaw with devastating gentleness. I know you're brave enough to demand answers from a man who could destroy you. That's more than most people reveal in a lifetime. You're good at this, Betty whispered. The intensity, the vulnerability, making women feel seen. I'm only good at it with you. The elevator dinged, doors sliding open to reveal a penthouse that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought restraint was a suggestion. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, all Christmas lights and darkness beyond. The furniture was sleek and expensive, the kind of space that belonged in magazines, not real life. Betty stepped out because staying in the elevator felt like admitting defeat. Nice place, very rich man with secrets. It's secure. Gilberto moved to the windows, scanning the street below with practiced vigilance. No one can reach us here. Except you brought me here, so clearly someone can reach it. He turned, and there was something almost like amusement in his eyes. You're remarkably difficult to intimidate. I have a 5-year-old. Nothing intimidates me anymore. Betty wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how cold she was. You promised answers. Start talking. Gilberto was quiet for a long moment, his silhouette dark against the glittering city beyond. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of confessions made in darkness. My name is Gilberto Arcuri. My family controls most of the shipping and import operations along the eastern seaboard. We're not criminals. He paused, corrected himself. We're not just times criminals. We're businessmen who operate in gray areas. That's a fancy way of saying mafia. That's a fancy way of saying powerful. He moved toward her, each step deliberate. And with power comes enemies. Rivals who would use any perceived weakness to destroy us. Betty's mind was racing. And I'm a weakness now, because they saw us together. Because they saw me protect you. Gilberto stopped just out of reach. In my world, that's as good as a declaration. A declaration of what? His eyes met hers, dark, intense, and achingly honest. That you matter to me. The words hung between them like a confession and a curse. Betty should run, should demand he take her home immediately. Should do literally anything except stand here feeling like her entire life had just pivoted on an axis she didn't understand. But she didn't move. This is crazy, she said softly. We just met. I know. I have a son, a life. I can't just... I know. Then why does this feel... She broke off, unable to finish. Gilberto closed the distance between them, his hand finding hers again. Like something inevitable? Yes. Like something dangerous. It's both. His thumb traced her knuckles. I'm giving you a choice, Betty. I can have you home in 20 minutes, and you'll never see me again. Or... A sound cut him off. Sharp, metallic. The unmistakable click of a lock being picked. Someone was breaking into the penthouse. Gilberto's entire body went rigid, his hand tightened on Betty's, then he pulled her toward the bedroom with swift, silent urgency. Closet, he whispered. Now, don't come out until I tell you. What? Now, Betty? The door to the penthouse swung open. Footsteps. Multiple people, moving with the confidence of trained killers. And Betty realized with cold, terrifying clarity that the night was far from over. Betty had approximately 3 seconds to decide between obedience and survival instinct. She chose option 3. Grab the nearest weapon. While Gilberto moved toward the penthouse entrance with lethal grace, Betty scanned the bedroom with frantic efficiency. Designer lamp? Too obvious. Vase? Cliché. Her eyes landed on a heavy crystal paperweight on the nightstand, abstract, expensive, and perfectly weighted for emergency skull-cracking. She snatched it up and pressed herself against the wall beside the closet, heart hammering so loud she was certain the intruders could hear it. Through the open bedroom door, she watched Gilberto's silhouette merge with shadows. The man who'd held her with such tenderness moments ago had transformed into something predatory and cold. He moved without sound, each step calculated, a gun appearing in his hand from somewhere inside his jacket. Asterisk. He has a gun. Of course he has a gun. Why wouldn't the mafia boss have a gun? Asterisk. Voices drifted from the main room. Italian, harsh, full of ugly laughter. Empty. He ran like always. Check the bedroom. Betty's grip tightened on the paperweight, her palms were sweating. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to hide, but she'd spent 5 years being a single mother, and single mothers didn't get the luxury of helplessness. Footsteps approached. Heavy boots on hardwood. A man appeared in the doorway, thick-necked, scarred, with eyes that had seen too much violence and enjoyed it. He scanned the room with casual brutality, his weapon raised. Betty didn't think. She just moved. She swung the paperweight with every ounce of strength she possessed, catching him across the temple with a sickening crack. The man stumbled, shock and pain registering on his face. His gun clattered to the floor. Asterisk. Putana asterisk. Betty kicked the weapon away, thank God for solid heels, and raised the paperweight again. You want to finish that sentence? Because I've got a really good follow-through. The man lunged. She dodged, barely, slamming into the dresser hard enough to rattle her teeth. He was bigger, stronger, trained for this kind of violence. Betty was running on pure maternal rage, and the muscle memory of 5 years wrestling a toddler into car seats. His hand closed around her throat. Then, Gilberto was there. He materialized like vengeance itself, yanking the man away from Betty with brutal efficiency. There was a sharp crack, bone breaking, and the man crumpled to the floor, unconscious or dead. Betty couldn't tell, and wasn't sure she wanted to know. I told you to stay hidden, Gilberto said, his voice eerily calm despite the violence still humming through his frame. He was going to find me anyway. Betty's voice came out shaky, her throat ached where the man had grabbed her. I figured offense was better than defense. Gilberto's eyes dropped to her neck, and something dangerous flickered across his face. He hurt you. I hurt him first. With your overpriced paperweight, you're welcome. For a moment, Gilberto just stared at her. Then, impossibly, he smiled a real smile, sharp and surprised and devastatingly attractive. You're insane. I prefer resourceful. Betty set the paperweight down with exaggerated care. Her hands were shaking. How many more are there? 2 in the main room. Both unconscious. He moved closer, his fingers ghosting over the red marks on her throat with such gentleness it made her chest ache. We need to leave, now. They'll have backup coming. Where? Gunfire erupted from somewhere in the building. Close. Too close. Gilberto's expression hardened. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the windows. We're going out the fire escape. It's December. It's snowing. I'm in a dress and heels. Would you prefer the armed men? Fire escape it is. He opened the window, and freezing air rushed in, carrying fat snowflakes that dissolved against Betty's skin. The city stretched out below them, Christmas lights and distant sirens, and a 15-story drop that made her stomach lurch. I'm not good with heights, Betty said. I won't let you fall. Gilberto climbed out first, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. He turned, extending his hand. Trust me. Asterisk. That word again. Trust. Asterisk. Betty took his hand and climbed through the window. The metal fire escape was slick with ice and snow, and the wind cut through her dress like knives. She could see her breath in white puffs, could feel her body already starting to shake from cold and adrenaline. Down, Gilberto commanded, keeping her hand locked in his as they descended. Watch your step. The metals iced over. They made it 3 levels before Betty's heel caught on a frozen grate. She stumbled, her foot sliding out from under her. For one terrifying moment, she was falling. Gilberto's arm wrapped around her waist, yanking her against his chest with bruising force. Her face pressed against his shoulder, his cologne mixing with the sharp scent of snow and danger. I've got you, he murmured into her hair. I've got you, Betty. She was shaking now from cold, from fear, from the feel of his body solid and warm against hers. This is officially the worst Christmas ever. Worse than sitting alone at table 12? Despite everything, Betty laughed. Okay, maybe second worst. A door slammed above them, voices shouting in Italian, urgent and angry. They're on the fire escape, Gilberto said, his jaw tight. We need to move faster. They descended into an alley that smelled like garbage and wet concrete. Snow fell in thick curtains now, muffling sound and turning the world into a blur of white and shadow. Betty's feet were numb, her dress soaked through and clinging to her body. Gilberto shrugged out of his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders without breaking stride. The silk lining was still warm from his body, and it smelled like him cedar and smoke and safety. You'll freeze, Betty protested. I've survived worse. He guided her toward a side street where a black car sat idling, engine running. Get in. Whose car? Mine. I always keep an escape vehicle ready. That's either really paranoid or really smart. It's survival. He opened the passenger door, practically lifting her inside. The interior was leather and warmth, the heater blasting at full power. Gilberto slid into the driver's seat and pulled away from the curb before Betty even had her seatbelt fastened. They drove in silence for several minutes, the city sliding past in a watercolor of lights and snow. Betty watched Gilberto's profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel with controlled tension, the muscle ticking beneath his eye. You're angry, she said softly. I'm furious. His voice was tight. They touched you. They put their hands on you, and I... He broke off, breathing hard. I should have predicted this, should have known they'd move this fast. Who are they? The Morelli family, rivals who want my territory, my connections, my power. His knuckles were white on the wheel. They've been testing boundaries for months. Tonight was supposed to be neutral ground. A Christmas truce. Didn't work out so well. No. He glanced at her, something raw and painful in his eyes. And now you're caught in the middle. Because of me. Betty should be terrified, should demand he take her home immediately and never contact her again. But she found herself reaching across the console, her hand covering his. I made the choice to dance with you, she said. I made the choice to follow you. I'm not some helpless victim, Gilberto. Stop treating me like I am. His hand turned, fingers threading through hers. You hit a trained killer with a paperweight. I improvised. You were magnificent. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning and promise and dangerous possibility. Snow accumulated on the windshield, the wipers moving in hypnotic rhythm. Betty realized she had no idea where they were going, and for the first time all night, she didn't care. Where are we heading? She asked eventually. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't think to look. Gilberto's thumb traced circles on her palm. We need to stay off the grid until I can neutralize the threat. How long? 24 hours, maybe less. Betty thought of Jacob, safe with her mother for the night, thought of her quiet apartment and her careful, controlled life, thought of the woman she'd been 6 hours ago sitting alone at a Christmas dinner, invisible and unremarkable. That woman felt like a stranger now. Okay, she said. 24 hours. Gilberto's expression shifted relief, and something darker, something that looked like hunger. Thank you. They drove through neighborhoods Betty didn't recognize, into areas where the Christmas decorations grew sparse and the buildings hunched closer together. Finally, Gilberto pulled into an underground parking garage, the entrance concealed behind a seemingly abandoned warehouse. Stay close, he said, killing the engine. We're almost... His phone buzzed. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Gilberto's face went pale as he read the screen. What? Betty asked, fear crawling up her spine. What is it? He looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw genuine terror in his eyes. They have your son. Betty stopped breathing. What did you just say? Her voice came out strangled, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Gilberto was already moving, his phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders in rapid Italian. But Betty couldn't process the words. Couldn't process anything except the image of Jacob, her baby, her entire world in the hands of monsters. No. She grabbed Gilberto's arm, her fingers digging into his bicep. No. You said he was with my mother. You said, he is times with your mother. Gilberto's eyes were wild, frantic in a way that terrified her more than his earlier coldness. They're both safe. I have men watching them. He held up his phone, and Betty saw the photo. Jacob. Her son. Asleep in his bed, clutching his dinosaur. Taken through the window. The message below read, *, we know where he sleeps. Back off, or we come back. *. They didn't take him, Gilberto said quickly, his hand covering hers. Betty, listen to me. They didn't take him. This is intimidation. A warning. A warning. Betty's voice climbed. They photographed my child through his Times window *. And my men have already moved your mother and Jacob to a secure location. He pulled up another screen, this one showing a video feed of her mother sitting on an unfamiliar couch, Jacob still sleeping peacefully beside her. See? Safe. I promised you protection, and I meant it. Betty's legs gave out. She sank against the car, her vision swimming. I'm going to be sick. Breathe. Gilberto crouched in front of her, his hands framing her face with devastating gentleness. Betty, look at me. He's safe. Your mother thinks it's a gas leak evacuation. They're in one of my family's safe houses with 6 armed guards. No one is getting near them. You moved them without asking me? I moved them to save their lives. No apology in his voice. Just certainty. The moment you danced with me, you became a target. I wasn't going to wait for permission to protect what matters to you. Betty wanted to hit him, wanted to scream, wanted to demand he undo everything. Take her back to 6 hours ago when her biggest problem was loneliness and cheap champagne. But Jacob was safe. That was all that mattered. I need to see him, she said. You will, once this is over. When is it over? Gilberto's expression went dark. When the Morellis are no longer a threat. And how do you plan to accomplish that? Strongly worded letter? Diplomatic negotiation? Betty. Don't. She pushed his hands away, standing on shaking legs. Don't patronize me. You dragged me into this nightmare. The least you can do is tell me the truth. Something shifted in his eyes. Resignation, maybe, or respect. He straightened, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of terrible honesty. I'm going to kill Marco Morelli. The words hung in the frozen air between them. Kill him, Betty repeated. You're going to commit murder. I'm going to eliminate a threat to everyone I care about. Gilberto's jaw was set. Marco has been pushing boundaries for months. Tonight, he crossed a line. And when you cross certain lines in my world, there are consequences. Your world, Betty laughed. Sharp and bitter. Your world just threatened my son, which is why I need to end this, now, tonight. He moved closer, and despite everything, Betty didn't step back. But I can't do it alone. I need... He broke off, something vulnerable flickering across his face. Need what? Insurance. Gilberto pulled out his phone again, scrolling to a document. 3 years ago, Marco Morelli was involved in a shipping accident. A cargo container fell at the docks, killed 2 workers. The investigation ruled it accidental. But it wasn't. It was sabotage. Marco was eliminating competitors who were using those docks. He handed her the phone. I have proof, documents, testimony from someone who was there. But the witness refuses to come forward without guaranteed protection. Betty scanned the document, her lawyer-adjacent brain, honed from years of navigating custody agreements and insurance claims catching details others might miss. This witness. They have photos? Security footage. Clear shots of Marco tampering with the equipment. Then why hasn't this gone to the authorities? Because the authorities in this city are bought and paid for. Gilberto's voice was cold. Marco has judges, cops, prosecutors in his pocket. The only justice in my world is the kind we make ourselves. Betty scrolled further, and then she saw it. The witness name buried in the digital paperwork. Asterisk Thomas Ford. Dock supervisor. Deceased 2022. Asterisk. The phone slipped from her hands. Betty? Gilberto caught her elbow. What? My husband. The words came out broken. Thomas Ford. That's my husband. He died 3 years ago in a dockyard accident. The silence that followed was deafening. Gilberto went perfectly still. Your husband worked the docks? He was a supervisor. They told me a container fell. Mechanical failure. Betty's mind was racing, pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. They told me it was an accident. That he was in the wrong place at the wrong time? Betty. Was he the witness? She grabbed Gilberto's jacket, her voice climbing. Was my husband the one who saw Marco Morelli commit sabotage? Gilberto's expression was answer enough. Oh God! Betty stumbled backward. Oh God! He was murdered. Thomas was murdered because he saw something he shouldn't have. I didn't know. Gilberto reached for her, but she flinched away. Betty, I swear to you, I didn't know the connection. The name was just a name in a file until you asked me to dance. Understanding crashed over her like ice water. You knew who I was. At the gala, you times knew asterisk. No. I knew Betty Ford was Thomas Ford's widow, but I didn't know you were the woman at table 12 until after I'd already approached you. His voice was raw. I saw you sitting there, looking brave and lonely and beautiful, and I couldn't look away. The connection to Thomas, I didn't make it until later, when I ran your information for security purposes. And you didn't think to mention it? I was going to. After we were safe. After, he ran his hands through his hair, frustration and guilt warring on his face. I knew the moment I told you, you'd look at me exactly the way you're looking at me now. Like I'm the monster who took everything from you. Betty's chest was tight. Did you? Did you kill my husband? No. Immediate. Certain. Marco Morelli killed your husband. I've been trying to prove it for 3 years. And tonight, when I saw you... He laughed, bitter and broken. I thought maybe fate was giving me a chance to make it right. By using me as bait? By protecting you while I destroy the man who destroyed your life. The words landed between them like a detonation. Betty's mind was spinning. Thomas had been murdered. Her husband, sweet, steady Thomas who'd kissed her goodbye that morning and never came home, had been killed by the same man now threatening her son. The files, she said suddenly. Thomas's files. After he died, the company sent me boxes of his personal effects from his office. I never went through them. They're still in storage. Gilberto's eyes sharpened. What kind of files? Everything. Work logs, schedules, personal notes. Her brain was working now, cutting through grief and shock. If he was gathering evidence against Marco, he would have hidden copies. Somewhere safe. Somewhere his wife might find them eventually. Gilberto moved closer, energy thrumming through his frame. Betty, if those files exist, we can bury Marco Morelli legally. No murder. No revenge killing. She met his eyes. We can make him pay the right way. For a moment, Gilberto just stared at her. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. What? Betty demanded. You're brilliant. He cupped her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. Terrifying and brilliant and absolutely magnificent. Most people would be running, screaming. You're already planning legal warfare. I prefer not to make my son an orphan, thanks. His expression sobered. I would never let that happen. You can't promise that. Watch me. His voice dropped, went rough and intense. Betty, I swear to you on everything I have, everything I am, I will keep you and Jacob safe, whatever it takes, whatever I have to do. She should pull away, should maintain distance between herself and this dangerous, complicated man who'd brought chaos into her carefully controlled life. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch. The storage unit, she said. It's across town. We need to go now before... Headlights flared behind them, multiple vehicles, moving fast, blocking the garage exit. Gilberto's gun was in his hand before Betty even registered the danger. "Get behind me," he commanded, his body shifting to shield hers. Now, car doors opened. Men emerged, 6, maybe 7, all armed, and at the center of them stood a man in an expensive coat, his smile cold and cruel in the harsh, fluorescent light. "Gilberto Arcuri," he called out, his accent thick and mocking. "And the lovely widow Ford. How perfect. I was hoping you'd bring her." Betty's blood turned to ice. Because she recognized that voice, recognized it from Thomas's funeral, from the man who'd offered condolences that felt like threats. Marco Morelli had found them, and they were trapped. The standoff lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Gilberto did something Betty didn't expect. He lowered his gun. "Marco," he said, his voice carrying an odd note of resignation. "You win." Betty's head whipped toward him. "What? You want me to back off? I'll back off." Gilberto's expression was unreadable, his body language shifting from predator to something almost defeated. "Just leave her out of it." Marco's cruel smile widened. "Now, this is interesting. The great Gilberto Arcuri, negotiating surrender." He circled closer, his men forming a tighter perimeter. "What's she worth to you? Your territory, your connections, your pride? All of it." Gilberto met Marco's eyes steadily. "Take whatever you want. Just guarantee her safety and her son's safety. Sworn oath, blood binding." Betty's pulse hammered. This was wrong. Everything about this felt wrong. "Gilberto, don't you dare." "Betty, please." He glanced at her, and for just a fraction of a second, she saw something in his eyes. Not defeat, not surrender. A plan. How touching. Marco pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. "You know what? I accept. Your empire for her life. We'll draw up the papers tomorrow, make it official." The lights in the parking garage exploded. Not went out, exploded. Sparks rained down as every bulb shattered simultaneously, plunging them into absolute darkness. Betty felt Gilberto's hand grab hers with bruising force, yanking her down just as gunfire erupted. "Stay low," he hissed in her ear. "Crawl toward the stairwell, 9 o'clock from here." "Go." "What about—" "Go, Betty." She went, her hands and knees scraping against cold concrete, her designer heels abandoned somewhere in the chaos. Behind her, she could hear shouting in Italian, more gunfire, the sharp crack of fists meeting flesh. Betty reached the stairwell door, her fingers finding the handle just as emergency lighting flickered on dim red bulbs that painted everything in hellish shadows. She looked back. Gilberto was fighting 3 of Marco's men at once, moving with brutal efficiency that spoke of years of training, but he was outnumbered, outgunned. And Marco was pulling out his phone again, this time making a call. Betty's survival instinct screamed at her to run, to get out, get to safety, get to Jacob. Instead, she grabbed the fire extinguisher mounted beside the stairwell. "Hey!" she shouted, her voice echoing through the garage. "Marco!" He turned, phone still pressed to his ear. Betty pulled the pin and sprayed. White foam exploded across Marco's face, his expensive suit, his perfectly styled hair. He stumbled backward, cursing violently, slipping on the chemical foam now coating the concrete. His men hesitated, distracted by their boss's undignified flailing. Gilberto didn't hesitate. He used the moment to disarm the nearest man, using the stolen weapon to fire 3 precise shots, not at people, but at the remaining lights. The garage plunged back into darkness, this time complete. Betty felt Gilberto's hand find hers again. "Run. Now." They ran. Up the stairwell, taking steps 2 at a time, Betty's lungs burning as they climbed floor after floor. Behind them, footsteps thundered in pursuit, angry voices echoing off concrete walls. "Where are we going?" Betty gasped. "Roof." "That's a terrible plan." "It's the only plan." They burst through the roof access door into freezing night air. Snow fell in thick sheets now, immediately soaking Betty's torn dress, turning her skin numb. The city sprawled below them, Christmas lights twinkling like distant stars. And at the far edge of the roof, a helicopter waited. "You have a helicopter," Betty said flatly. Of course you have a helicopter. Emergency extraction. Gilberto pulled her toward it, his hand never leaving hers. I told you I always have an exit strategy. The pilot saw them coming and started the engine, rotors beginning their slow spin. They were 20 feet away when the roof access door slammed open. Marco emerged, foam-covered and furious, his remaining men flanking him with weapons drawn. "Stop!" he roared. Gilberto and Betty didn't stop. 10 feet from the helicopter. I said stop. 5 feet. A gunshot cracked through the air, not from Marco's men, but from somewhere else. The bullet pinged off the helicopter's frame, dangerously close to the fuel tank. Betty looked up. On the adjacent building, another sniper was positioned, his rifle aimed directly at them. Gilberto. I see him. His jaw was tight. Get in the helicopter. I'll handle. There's no time. Betty made a split-second decision. She grabbed Gilberto's gun from his waistband, turned and fired 3 wild shots in the sniper's direction. She didn't hit him, wasn't even close. But the distraction worked. The sniper ducked, giving them precious seconds. Gilberto lifted her bodily into the helicopter, then climbed in after her. Go! He shouted at the pilot. The helicopter lurched into the air just as Marco reached them, his hand grabbing for the skid but missing by inches. His scream of rage was lost in the roar of the rotors. They rose into the snowy night sky, the hotel shrinking beneath them. Betty collapsed against the leather seat, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Gilberto wrapped a thermal blanket around her shoulders, then pulled her against his chest. You shot at a sniper. I missed. You bought us time. That's all that mattered. His hand rubbed warmth back into her arms. You keep saving my life tonight. You keep putting me in positions where I have to. Betty pulled back to look at him. What was that back there? The surrender act? A distraction. Marco's ego is his weakness. He couldn't resist the chance to gloat. Gilberto's expression was grim. I had men positioned to kill the lights on my signal. The rest was improvisation. You gambled with our lives. I gambled with mine. You were supposed to run. Well, I didn't. Betty's voice rose. I stayed. I fought. I used a fire extinguisher as a weapon because apparently that's my life now. So stop acting like I'm some fragile thing you need to protect and start treating me like a partner in this insanity. Something shifted in Gilberto's eyes, surprise, respect, and something hotter that made Betty's breath catch despite the cold. A partner, he repeated softly. Unless you'd rather I'd jump out of this helicopter right now and take my chances with gravity. His hand cupped her jaw, thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You're freezing, covered in concrete dust, your dress is ruined, and you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. That's the adrenaline talking. That's the truth. His voice dropped. Betty, I know you have every reason to hate me. I know what I cost you. But tonight... He broke off, searching her face. Tonight, you made a choice. You could have run. Instead, you stayed. You fought. Why? Betty's heart hammered. Because Marco threatened my son. Because Thomas deserves justice. Because... She stopped, the real answer catching in her throat. Because? Gilberto prompted, his thumb still tracing circles on her skin. Because when you look at me, I feel seen. And I haven't felt that way in 3 years. The admission hung between them, raw and honest in the helicopter's dim interior. Gilberto's expression cracked, something vulnerable breaking through. Betty, the pilot's voice cut through the moment. Sir, we have a problem. They both turned toward the cockpit. On the pilot's radar screen, 2 blips were approaching fast. Military-grade helicopters, closing in from both sides. Marco has friends in the aviation authority, Gilberto said grimly. They'll force us down. Claim it's a safety violation. Can we outrun them? Not in this weather. Not with their equipment. He was already typing on his phone. But I have a better idea. We're going to disappear. How do you disappear in a helicopter? Trust me. That word again. Trust. Betty met his eyes. Those dark, intense eyes that had pulled her into this nightmare and somehow made her feel more alive than she'd felt in years. Okay, she said. I trust you. Gilberto's answering smile was brilliant and brief. He leaned forward to the pilot. Take us to the lake house. Drop altitude. Stay below their radar. The helicopter banked sharply, diving through snow and darkness. The pursuing aircraft adjusted course, but Gilberto's pilot was better weaving between buildings, using the storm as cover. 15 minutes later, they landed on a private dock beside a sprawling house on a frozen lake. The moment the skids touched down, Gilberto had Betty out and running toward the house. Inside, it was warm and dark, furnished like a magazine spread, but clearly unused. Gilberto locked the door behind them, checked the windows, then finally allowed himself to breathe. Betty stood in the middle of the living room, dripping melted snow onto expensive hardwood, her entire body still vibrating with adrenaline. We're safe here, Gilberto said. Marco doesn't know about this property. No one does. For how long? Long enough to plan our next move. He moved toward her, pulling off his soaked jacket. Betty, about what you said in the helicopter. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't make it into something more than it was. We're stuck together until this is over. That's all. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Because when Gilberto looked at her like that, like she was something precious and powerful and worth fighting for, she felt the last of her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. You need dry clothes, he said finally. There's a bedroom upstairs, should have everything you need. I'll make some calls, see if I can. His phone buzzed. Gilberto looked at the screen and went pale. What? Betty moved closer. What is it? He turned the phone toward her. It was a video message. Jacob, awake now, sitting in an unfamiliar room. He looked scared but unharmed, and standing behind him, hand on his shoulder, was a woman Betty didn't recognize. The message text read, We have the boy. The grandmother too. You have 6 hours to bring us Gilberto Arcuri and Thomas Ford's evidence files, or they both disappear. Come alone, Mrs. Ford. Or, your son pays the price. Betty's world tilted. No, she whispered. No, no, no. You said he was safe. You said your men were watching. They were. Gilberto's voice was hollow. Which means someone inside my organization betrayed us. Betty looked at him, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt true terror. Because Marco Morelli didn't have her son. Someone worse did. Someone who knew all of Gilberto's safe houses, all his plans, all his weaknesses. Someone who'd been watching them all along. Betty stared at the video of Jacob on the phone screen until her vision blurred. Her son's small face, trying to be brave, her mother's hand gripping his shoulder, the unfamiliar woman standing behind them like a promise of violence. Who is she? Betty's voice came out hollow. The woman in the video. Gilberto's jaw was tight, his entire body radiating tension. Lucia Ferrante, my cousin, my father's niece. He paused, the words seeming to cost him. My second in command. The betrayal hit Betty like a physical blow. Your cousin did this? The Ferrante side of the family never accepted my leadership. They thought the business should have gone to Lucia's brother when my father died. Gilberto moved to the window, his silhouette dark against the snow-covered landscape beyond. I've been so focused on external threats, I didn't see the knife coming from inside. Betty's mind raced through panic toward something colder, sharper. The part of her that had survived widowhood, single motherhood, poverty, the part that refused to break. The message said to come alone, she said. Which means it's a trap for both of us. Obviously. And you have 6 hours to figure out who else in your organization is compromised. Less than that. I need to move resources, secure alternate locations. No. Betty set the phone down with deliberate care. You need to tell me everything. Right now. Every piece of information you've been holding back, every dangerous truth about Thomas, about the Morellis, about your family. Because if I'm walking into that trap to get my son back, I'm doing it with full knowledge. Gilberto turned from the window, his expression unreadable. Betty. Everything, Gilberto. Or I walk out that door right now and handle this myself. For a long moment, They stared at each other across the expensive living room, two people bound by circumstance and something neither of them wanted to name. "All right," Gilberto said finally. "Everything." He moved to the bar, poured 2 glasses of whiskey, and handed one to Betty. She took it, the crystal heavy and cold in her palm. "My family has controlled East Coast shipping for 3 generations," he began. "Legitimate business mixed with less legitimate operations. Protection, gambling, some controlled substances. But never human trafficking, never children." His voice hardened. "That's always been the line." "And Marco Morelli?" "Marco's family deals in anything profitable, including the things we won't touch." Gilberto took a long drink. 3 years ago, we discovered they were using our docks, our property, to move illegal cargo. My father wanted to handle it quietly, politically. I wanted to expose them, burn their operation to the ground." Betty's grip tightened on her glass. "And Thomas?" "Thomas was Marco's dock supervisor. He came to me with evidence, photos, manifests, everything we'd need to destroy the Morellis legally. I promised him protection, promised his family would be taken care of if anything happened." Gilberto's voice cracked. "I failed. Marco found out about the betrayal before we could act. He made it look like an accident. Why didn't you tell me this at the gala? Why the dance, the pretend wife act?" "Because Marco had been asking questions about you, about whether Thomas had kept copies of the evidence, whether his widow knew anything." Gilberto met her eyes. "I needed you close. Needed you protected. The dance, the public appearance, it was meant to signal to Marco that you were under my protection, untouchable. Instead, it made me a target. Yes, no apology in the word, just brutal honesty, and I would do it again, because at least this way, I can control who gets close to you." Betty laughed, sharp and bitter. "You can't even control your own cousin." "No, I can't." Gilberto set his glass down. "But I can get your son back." "How? If Lucia knows all your safe houses, all your resources, all your people, she doesn't know everything." Something dangerous flickered across his face. "There are assets I keep separate. People who answer only to me. Locations not even my family knows about. Like this lake house." "Exactly." He moved closer, and Betty could smell the whiskey on his breath, the cedar of his cologne beneath the scent of snow. "Betty, I need you to trust me one more time. That's a big ask, considering your cousin kidnapped my son." "I know. But I have a plan." "Does it involve me as bait?" "Yes." Betty blinked. "Points for honesty, I guess." Despite the circumstances, Gilberto's lips curved, not quite a smile, but close. "You would make terrible bait if you didn't know you were bait. You're too smart, too quick, you'd improvise and ruin the entire plan. I'm choosing to take that as a compliment. It was meant as one." His hand came up slowly, giving her time to refuse, and cupped her jaw. "Lucia wants me to trade myself for Jacob. She's planning to kill all 3 of us, you, your mother, your son, to prove a point about my leadership being weak." Cheerful thought. "But she's underestimating you." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "She thinks you're just some civilian I'm protecting out of guilt. She doesn't know you charged into danger tonight, doesn't know you tackled Marco Morelli, used a fire extinguisher as a weapon, shot at a sniper." "I missed the sniper." "You didn't hesitate." His eyes burned into hers. "That's what matters. Betty, I need you to walk into that meeting tomorrow and make Lucia believe you're terrified, helpless, just a mother desperate to save her son. And then? Then you survive. Whatever it takes." His voice dropped. "I'll handle the rest." Betty should pull away, should demand a better plan, more details, actual strategy. But Gilberto's hand was warm against her skin, and she was so tired of being strong alone. "What if your plan fails?" she whispered. "It won't." "Gilberto, it won't." His forehead touched hers, the gesture intimate and devastating. "Because I'm not losing you. Not to Lucia. Not to Marco. Not to anyone. You barely know me." "I know enough." His breath ghosted across her lips. "I know you sat alone at a Christmas dinner and didn't apologize for taking up space. I know you make jokes when you're terrified. I know you'll fight like hell for the people you love. That's everything. Betty's chest felt tight. This is insane. Completely. We could both die tomorrow. Probably. His hand slid into her hair. But tonight, we're alive. She should say no, should maintain distance, should remember that this man got her husband killed and dragged her into a nightmare. But when his lips brushed hers soft, questioning, giving her every chance to refuse, Betty stopped thinking and just felt. The kiss started gentle, tentative, a question posed in the darkness of a borrowed house, while snow fell outside and danger waited beyond the walls. Then Betty's hands fisted in Gilberto's shirt, pulling him closer, and gentle became urgent. He responded instantly, his arms banding around her waist, lifting her slightly as he deepened the kiss. She tasted whiskey and desperation, felt the barely controlled violence humming beneath his skin. This was dangerous. This was stupid. This was perfect. Gilberto murmured against her lips. You're perfect. Betty pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. I'm a mess. I'm terrified. My son is safe until tomorrow. His thumb traced her lower lip. Tonight, let me give you something else to think about. Like what? Like this. He kissed her again, slower this time, thorough and claiming. His hands mapped her body through the borrowed clothes she'd changed into, learning curves and responses with devastating focus. Betty's mind went blissfully blank. There was only heat and pressure, the solid weight of him against her, the way he kissed like she was oxygen and he was drowning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the room felt smaller, more charged. We should stop, Betty said, not moving. Probably. Gilberto's hands stayed at her waist. Are we going to? I don't know. She laughed shakily. I came to a Christmas dinner alone 6 hours ago. Now I'm kissing a mafia boss in a lake house while his cousin holds my son hostage. I've lost all sense of normal decision-making. Good. His smile was wicked. Normal is overrated. Betty opened her mouth to respond, then froze. Outside, through the window, she'd seen something. A flash of movement in the tree line, brief but unmistakable. Gilberto, she said quietly. We're not alone. His entire demeanor changed in an instant. The heat drained from his expression, replaced by cold calculation. He moved to the window, staying to the side where he couldn't be seen from outside. How many? He asked. I don't know, I just saw there. Betty pointed. 3 o'clock. Someone just moved between those trees. Gilberto pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. They found us faster than I expected. Lucia? Or Marco? Or both? He grabbed Betty's hand. We need to leave. Now. There's nowhere to go. We're on a frozen lake surrounded by woods. There's always somewhere to go. He pulled her toward the back of the house, into a room that looked like a study. With swift efficiency, he pressed something on the bookshelf, and a section of wall swung inward, revealing a narrow staircase leading down. Secret passages, Betty said flatly. Because of course. My grandfather built this place during Prohibition. The whole house is tunnels and escape routes. He pulled her inside, closing the wall behind them. This leads to a dock on the other side of the lake. There's a car waiting. They descended into darkness lit only by small emergency lights along the floor. The air smelled like earth and old stone. How many people know about this? Betty asked. Just me. And now you. Not even Lucia? Especially not. Gilberto stopped so suddenly Betty nearly collided with him. Ahead, blocking the tunnel, stood a figure illuminated by a single flashlight. Lucia Ferrante smiled, cold and triumphant. Hello, cousin. Going somewhere? Behind her, Betty could see at least 4 armed men. They were trapped. And in Lucia's hand was a phone showing a live video feed Jacob and Betty's mother in what looked like a basement, still unharmed but clearly scared. Now, Lucia said pleasantly. Let's discuss the terms of your surrender. Betty stared at Lucia Ferrante and made a calculation. 4 armed men, 1 tunnel, no escape route behind them. Jacob's terrified face on that phone screen. But Lucia was standing 12 feet away. And Betty had learned something important tonight. People with guns expected fear, expected compliance. They didn't expect a single mother who'd just kissed a mafia boss and decided she was done being a victim. "You know what?" Betty said conversationally, taking a step forward. "I'm really tired of people threatening my son." Lucia's smile faltered. "Excuse me? You heard me. Another step." Betty could feel Gilberto tense beside her, could sense him preparing to stop her. She squeezed his hand once, "Trust me," and kept walking. First Marco with his creepy window photos. Now you with your dramatic tunnel ambush. It's getting old. Betty Gilberto's warning came too late. She was already moving, not toward Lucia, but toward the emergency lighting along the tunnel floor. Her foot connected with the first light fixture, shattering it. Then the second, third. Darkness swallowed them. Chaos erupted. Shouting in Italian. The harsh beam of Lucia's flashlight swinging wildly. Someone fired the gunshot, deafening in the enclosed space, ricocheting off stone. Betty felt Gilberto's arm wrap around her waist, pulling her down and back. They hit the ground hard, his body covering hers as more shots echoed overhead. "The service passage?" he breathed in her ear. "Left wall? 3 feet? Can you feel it?" Betty's fingers scraped stone, searching. There, a seam in the rock, barely noticeable. She pressed, and a section gave way, revealing a crawl space. "Go," Gilberto commanded. "Not without—" "Go, Betty. I'll be right behind you." She went, crawling into darkness on hands and knees, feeling her way through a passage barely wide enough for shoulders. Behind her she heard Gilberto follow, heard him do something that made the entrance seal shut with a grinding sound. "Keep moving," he said. "This passage leads to the old boathouse. They won't find the entrance." Betty crawled faster, ignoring the way stone scraped her palms, the way her breath came in ragged gasps. The passage seemed endless, claustrophobic, until finally it opened into a larger space. She tumbled out into what looked like an abandoned boathouse, moonlight streaming through broken windows to illuminate dust and decay. Snow had drifted through the gaps, creating patches of white on warped floorboards. Gilberto emerged behind her, immediately moving to block the crawlspace entrance with an old crate. His shirt was torn, blood seeping through a graze on his shoulder. "You're hurt," Betty said. "It's nothing." He was already pulling out his phone, typing frantically. "I'm calling in reinforcements. Lucia can't have turned everyone. There are still people loyal to me. Will they get here in time? They have to." His jaw was tight as he waited for a response. When his phone buzzed, his expression went darker. "Damn it. What?" "Lucia's blocked all my accounts, frozen my assets. She's moving faster than I anticipated." He looked at Betty, something raw and almost desperate in his eyes. "Without resources, without backup, we improvise." Betty moved to the window, scanning the frozen lake beyond. "How far to the nearest town?" 5 miles. Through woods. In a snowstorm. Gilberto joined her, his presence solid and warm at her back. "Betty, I need to tell you something, in case we don't—" "Don't." She turned to face him. "Don't do the noble confession thing. We're getting out of this. We're getting Jacob back. And then you can tell me whatever you want, over coffee like a normal person." His hand came up, cupping her face with such tenderness it made her chest ache. "You're extraordinary. I'm terrified and faking it really well. That's what courage is." His thumb traced her lower lip. "Betty, The boathouse door exploded inward. Lucia stood in the entrance, snow swirling around her like a vengeful angel. Her men flanked her, weapons drawn. But something was different. She was alone now, no phone showing Jacob, no immediate threat. Just cold calculation in her eyes. "Clever," Lucia said, using the old passages. "But you're trapped, cousin. And Mrs. Ford." Her gaze slid to Betty. "Your son is waiting. Scared. Calling for his mother. How much longer will you make him suffer?" Betty's hands curled into fists. "Where is he?" "Safe. For now." Lucia pulled out her phone, showing a new video. Jacob was crying now. Betty's mother trying to comfort him. "But my patience has limits. Gilberto surrenders, or the boy disappears. Your choice." "Take me instead," Betty said immediately. "Let Jacob and my mother go. I'll do whatever you want." "Betty, no." Gilberto grabbed her arm. "It's not negotiable." She pulled free, stepping toward Lucia. "I'm what you want anyway, right? Proof that Gilberto's weak? That he cares about something more than power? Well, here I am. Use me." Lucia studied her with something like respect. "You would trade yourself for the child?" Without hesitation. Fascinating. Lucia lowered the phone. "But ultimately pointless. I don't want you, Mrs. Ford. I want my cousin broken, and killing you in front of him accomplishes that much more effectively." She raised her weapon. Gilberto moved faster than thought, shoving Betty behind him, his body a shield. "You want to prove I'm weak, Lucia? Then face me. Not her, not her son. Me." "How touching." Lucia's finger tightened on the trigger. "Goodbye, cuss." A gunshot cracked through the air. But it didn't come from Lucia. She stumbled, shock registering on her face as blood bloomed across her shoulder. Her weapon clattered to the floor. Her men spun, searching for the shooter. Through the broken windows, Betty saw movement, figures emerging from the tree line, advancing with military precision. At least a dozen, all armed, all wearing the same dark tactical gear. Leading them was a man Betty didn't recognize, older, with steel-gray hair and eyes like flint. "Lower your weapons," he commanded Lucia's men. His voice carried absolute authority. "Or we kill all of you where you stand." Lucia clutched her bleeding shoulder, fury and pain warring on her face. "Uncle Salvatore." "Shut up!" The man Salvatore entered the boathouse, his gaze moving from Lucia to Gilberto to Betty. "You've done enough damage tonight, Lucia. Started a war within the family. Kidnapped civilians, betrayed everything we stand for." "I was trying to fix." "You were trying to seize power." Salvatore's expression was carved from ice. "And you failed. Men, secure them." His team moved forward, disarming Lucia's men with swift efficiency. Lucia herself was pulled to her feet, zip-tied, her protests ignored. Betty's legs nearly gave out. Gilberto caught her, his arms coming around her with crushing force. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "It's over, Betty. You're safe. Jacob. Salvatore's men already have him. He's safe. Your mother, too." Gilberto pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "My uncle may be a ruthless bastard, but he doesn't hurt children." Salvatore approached them, his expression unreadable. "Gilberto, it seems you've been busy tonight." "Uncle." Gilberto's posture shifted, became more formal. "I didn't think you'd intervene." "You're my nephew." Lucia overstepped. Salvatore's gaze moved to Betty. "And you must be Thomas Ford's widow. I was sorry to hear about your husband. He was a good man." Betty blinked. "You knew Thomas?" "Everyone knew Thomas." Something almost like regret crossed Salvatore's face. "He was trying to do the right thing. It cost him his life. For that, you have my apologies and my protection." "I don't want your protection. I want my son. He's in the car. Sleeping. Unharmed." Salvatore gestured toward the door. "My men gave him hot chocolate and told him this was all a Christmas adventure. He thinks you went on a special trip." Tears stung Betty's eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." Salvatore's expression hardened. "Because now we need to discuss what happens next. Gilberto has made a mess of family politics. Marco Morelli is still a threat. And you, Mrs. Ford." His eyes locked onto hers. "You're at the center of it all." "What does that mean?" Betty asked. "It means," a new voice said from the doorway, "that things just got much more complicated." Betty turned. Standing in the entrance, flanked by his own men, was Marco Morelli, and he was smiling. "Did I miss the family reunion?" Marco asked pleasantly. "Because I brought a gift." He stepped aside, and Betty's blood turned to ice. Behind him, held at gunpoint by one of his men, was a woman Betty recognized from the tunnel video. The woman who'd been guarding Jacob. And she was wearing a wire. "Surprise," Marco said. "I've been recording everything. Every confession. Every admission of illegal activity. Every family secret." His smile widened. "And in about 30 seconds it all goes live to the FBI." Salvatore's face went pale. You wouldn't. I would. Unless, Marco's gaze locked on Gilberto, unless you give me what I want, right now. Or, I destroy all of you. The silence in the boathouse stretched like a drawn blade. Marco's finger hovered over his phone screen, 30 seconds from destroying 3 generations of the Arcuri family empire. Salvatore's men had their weapons trained on Marco's crew. Lucia slumped against the wall, blood seeping through her makeshift bandage. And Betty stood at the center of it all, her mind racing through impossible calculations. What do you want? Gilberto asked, his voice deadly calm. Everything. Marco's smile widened. Your territories, your connections, your shipping operations. Sign them over tonight, and maybe I don't send this recording to every federal agent on the East Coast. That's not a negotiation, Salvatore said coldly. That's extortion. Call it what you want. You have 20 seconds. Betty's brain worked overtime, processing variables. Marco needed leverage to keep them from simply killing him. The recordings were it. But recordings could be deleted, destroyed, intercepted, unless they were already uploaded somewhere. You're bluffing, Betty said suddenly. All eyes turned to her. If you actually had those recordings ready to send, you wouldn't be standing here negotiating. You'd just do it. And leave. Marco's smile flickered. You think you're clever? I think you need something from us beyond the territories. Betty took a step forward, ignoring Gilberto's warning hand on her arm. Otherwise, this is suicide. You walk in here, threaten the Arcuri family, and expect to walk out alive? You're not that stupid. Betty. Gilberto's voice carried a warning. But she was already moving, her mind 3 steps ahead. You need protection. From someone bigger than the Arcuris. Someone who's been pressuring you to deliver results or face consequences yourself. Marco's jaw tightened. Bingo. Who is it? Betty pressed. The Russians? The Colombians? Who's pulling your strings, Marco? Shut up. He's right. A new voice came from the darkness beyond the door, cultured, accented, carrying the weight of old money and older violence. She is clever. A man stepped into the moonlight streaming through the broken windows, tall, silver-haired, wearing a coat that probably cost more than Betty's car. His eyes were pale blue and absolutely empty of warmth. Salvatore went rigid. Constantine. Salvatore. It's been too long. The man Constantine surveyed the boathouse with mild distaste. What a disappointing venue for such important business. The Bratva has no jurisdiction here, Salvatore said. The Bratva has jurisdiction everywhere money flows. And your nephew, Constantine's gaze moved to Gilberto, has been disrupting those flows with his moral posturing about trafficking and children. Betty's stomach dropped. Your Russian mob. Such crude terminology. I prefer international businessman. Constantine's smile was reptilian. Mr. Morelli works for my organization. And he's correct, I do need your family's cooperation, or your destruction. Either works. We don't deal in human trafficking, Gilberto said flatly. That's non-negotiable. Then you're no longer useful. Constantine gestured, and more men emerged from the shadows, at least 20, heavily armed, surrounding the boathouse completely. I had hoped Marco's leverage would be sufficient. But if not, he shrugged, we simply eliminate the problem and install more cooperative management. Betty's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. Jacob was safe for now, but if Constantine's men moved— Wait. Betty stepped forward before she could second-guess herself. You want cooperation? I can give you something better. Betty, don't. Gilberto moved to stop her, but she evaded his grasp. Thomas Ford's evidence files, she said clearly. Complete documentation of Marco's operations, including his connections to your organization, names, dates, cargo manifests, everything. Constantine's expression sharpened with interest. Go on. Those files are hidden. Only I know where. You kill us, you never find them. And when they eventually surface, and they will, your entire East Coast operation gets exposed. You're bluffing. Am I? Betty met his cold gaze steadily. Thomas was thorough, paranoid even. He kept backup files in multiple locations because he knew Marco would come for him. I've spent 3 years ignoring those storage boxes, but I know what's in them. Do you really want to risk it? Constantine studied her for a long moment. What do you want in exchange? Safe passage. For me, my son, my mother. We walk away, and you never come near us again. You leave the Arcuri family's legitimate operations alone, they stay out of trafficking, you stay out of their territory. And the files? Destroyed. After we're safe. Betty, no. Gilberto's voice was anguished. Those files are the only leverage we have against Marco, the only proof. They're not worth our lives. She turned to him, her hand finding his. Thomas is gone, I can't bring him back, but I can save Jacob, save us. Isn't that what he would have wanted? Gilberto's expression cracked, something raw and painful breaking through. You shouldn't have to choose. But I do. She squeezed his hand. And I choose life. Constantine watched their exchange with calculating interest. How touching. Very well, Mrs. Ford. Bring me the files within 24 hours and you have your deal. No. Salvatore stepped forward. This is Arcuri territory. You don't make deals here without... The gunshot was shockingly loud in the enclosed space. Salvatore stumbled, shock registering on his face as blood bloomed across his chest. He collapsed, and chaos erupted. Gilberto moved before Betty could blink, shoving her behind a collapsed beam as bullets tore through the boathouse. Wood splintered, glass shattered, the air filled with cordite and screaming. Betty's ears rang. She could see Salvatore's men returning fire, Marco's crew scrambling for cover, Constantine's forces advancing with military precision. "We need to move!" Gilberto shouted over the gunfire. "The back window, can you make it?" Betty looked. 20 feet of open space between their cover and the window, bullets chewing through everything in between. "Not a chance," she said. "Then we go together. On 3. 1. Wait!" Betty grabbed his jacket. "Gilberto, if we don't make it, we'll make it. But if we don't..." She pulled him close, kissed him hard and desperate, pouring 3 years of grief and 6 hours of chaos, and something terrifyingly close to love into the gesture. "Thank you, for seeing me, for making me feel alive again." His hand cupped her face. "This isn't goodbye, too." The explosion came from somewhere outside, massive, world-shaking, turning night into day. The boathouse's remaining windows shattered, the floor shaking as fire bloomed across the frozen lake. "What the hell?" Marco's voice, panicked. Betty and Gilberto scrambled to the window. Outside, Constantine's vehicles were engulfed in flames. Men scattered, shouting in Russian and English. And descending from the sky, rotors cutting through smoke and snow, were 3 helicopters bearing federal insignia. "FBI!" A voice boomed through loudspeakers. "This is a federal raid. Drop your weapons and surrender immediately." Betty stared in disbelief. "How..." "Salvatore," Gilberto said quietly, looking at his uncle's body. "He must have called them, knew he was dying, and wanted to take Constantine down with him. One final act of loyalty, one final play." The boathouse doors burst open, and federal agents poured in vests, weapons, shouted commands. Betty found herself being pulled away from Gilberto, hands on her shoulders, someone checking her for weapons. I don't have..." She struggled to see Gilberto through the chaos. "Please, my son, Jacob Ford is safe," a female agent said firmly. "We have him and your mother in protective custody. You're safe, Mrs. Ford." "But Gilberto..." She watched as they surrounded him, weapons drawn. Watched him raise his hand slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "It's okay," he mouthed. "It's okay." But it wasn't okay. Because the agent was putting him in handcuffs, reading him his rights, and Betty realized with sick certainty that Salvatore's final play had saved them from Constantine. But it had also given the FBI everything they needed to destroy the Arcuri family. Including Gilberto. "Wait!" Betty struggled against the agent. He saved me. He protected. Ma'am, please calm down. We'll take your statement at the field office. Betty was being guided toward the door, toward the helicopters and safety and Jacob. She should feel relief, should feel grateful. Instead, she looked back at Gilberto one last time. He stood straight despite the handcuffs, his eyes holding hers across the chaos. And in that moment Betty saw her future split into two paths. The safe one, where she took Jacob and disappeared into witness protection and never looked back. And the dangerous one, the one where she fought for the man who'd asked her to dance. The agent pushed her through the door, into the snow and the flashing lights. And Betty made her choice. I need to speak to whoever's in charge, she said firmly. Now, because I have information about Marco Morelli and Konstantin Volkov that you're going to want to hear. The agent hesitated. Ma'am, I have Thomas Ford's evidence files, complete documentation of their trafficking operations, and I'll hand them over. Betty's voice hardened with determination. On one condition. The FBI agent, Special Agent Rodriguez, studied Betty across the interrogation table with barely concealed frustration. Let me get this straight, Rodriguez said. You'll hand over evidence that could dismantle two major criminal organizations, but only if we grant immunity to Gilberto Arcuri? Not just immunity. Betty kept her voice steady despite her exhaustion. Witness protection for me, my son and my mother. And Gilberto walks on all charges related to tonight. That's a hell of an ask. And I have a hell of an offer. Betty leaned forward. Thomas Ford's files contain 3 years of documentation, shipping manifests, financial records, testimony, everything you need to prosecute Marco Morelli and Konstantin Volkov for trafficking, racketeering, and murder. But Gilberto? He's been trying to stop them. He recruited my husband to gather that evidence. Rodriguez's expression shifted. You're saying Arcuri is what? A vigilante? I'm saying he has lines he won't cross. Children, human trafficking. He's been at war with Marco and Konstantin because they don't. Betty's voice hardened. My husband died trying to expose them. Gilberto has spent 3 years trying to finish what Thomas started. That makes him an asset, not an enemy. Or it makes him a criminal with a conscience. Then arrest someone with no conscience instead. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Rodriguez pulled out her phone, made a call. The conversation was brief, terse, full of legal terminology. Betty barely followed. Your deal is contingent on the files being everything you claim, Rodriguez said finally. And Arcuri cooperates fully with our investigation. He will. You sound certain. Betty met her eyes. He's been waiting 3 years for this chance. He'll cooperate. They brought Gilberto in 20 minutes later. He looked exhausted, his shirt torn and blood-stained, but his eyes found Betty immediately across the room. The relief in his expression made her chest ache. Mrs. Ford has negotiated terms, Rodriguez said. In exchange for your testimony against Morelli and Volkov and complete cooperation with our investigation, you'll receive immunity for tonight's events. No charges. Gilberto's gaze never left Betty. And her? Witness protection. Her son, her mother. New identities, new location, complete severance from her old life. Rodriguez paused. Including you. Betty watched something crack in Gilberto's expression. Pain, acceptance, resignation all at once. Done, he said quietly. Gilberto, Betty started. It's the right choice. His voice was steady despite the devastation in his eyes. You'll be safe. Jacob will be safe. That's what matters. Rodriguez stood. We'll process the paperwork. Mrs. Ford, someone will take you to your son shortly. She gestured to the door. Mr. Arcuri. We need your statement. Betty found herself being guided into the hallway, away from Gilberto, away from the man who'd turned her world upside down in the space of one impossible night. This is what I wanted, she told herself. Safety, normal life, Jacob growing up without danger. So why did it feel like she was leaving her heart behind? They reunited her with Jacob in a safe house an hour later. Her son launched himself into her arms, dinosaur clutched tight. talking a mile a minute about the adventure and the nice FBI people who'd given him hot chocolate. Betty held him close, breathing in his little boy scent, feeling the solid weight of him against her chest. This was what mattered. This was everything. Her mother caught her eye over Jacob's head, concern written across her face. "Betty? Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Mom." She forced a smile. "We're all fine." But that night, after Jacob fell asleep and her mother retired to the guest room, Betty stood at the window watching snow fall over the safe house's quiet neighborhood. Everything looked peaceful, normal, exactly what she'd asked for. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something made her press accept. "Betty." Gilberto's voice, rough and low and achingly familiar. "You're not supposed to contact me. The deal." "I know. I have 5 minutes before they track this call." A pause. "I needed to hear your voice. Needed to know you're really safe." Betty's throat tightened. "We're safe. Jacob's asleep. Mom's here. It's good. Good." He sounded like the word cost him. "Betty, what you did tonight, negotiating with the FBI, bargaining for my freedom. You would have done the same. In a heartbeat." His voice dropped. "I need you to know something. Tonight wasn't guilt, wasn't obligation. What I feel for you." He broke off. "Cristo, I'm saying this all wrong. Gilberto. I'm falling in love with you, Betty Ford. Maybe I started falling the moment I saw you sitting alone at that table, brave and beautiful and refusing to apologize for existing. Maybe it was when you tackled Marco Morelli with nothing but rage and a fire extinguisher. I don't know when it happened. But it happened." Tears burned behind Betty's eyes. "This is a terrible time to tell me that. It's the only time I have." She could hear the smile in his voice. "You're about to disappear into witness protection. New name, new life. This is my last chance to be honest." "I can't." Betty's voice cracked. "Gilberto, I can't do this. I have Jacob to think about. I can't drag him into your world." "I know. I'm not asking you to." A beat of silence. "I just needed you to know. You changed my life, Betty. In one night, you made me remember what it feels like to want something more than power or revenge. You made me feel human again." "You are human." She pressed her hand against the cold glass. "You're infuriating and dangerous and impossibly complicated. But you're human. And you're—" She stopped. The words, catching. "I'm what?" "You're the first person in 3 years who made me feel seen." The silence stretched, heavy with everything they couldn't say. "Time's up," Gilberto said finally. "They're tracking the call. Betty?" He stopped. "Be happy. Raise Jacob. Live the life you deserve." "Gilberto, wait." The line went dead. Betty stood at the window for a long time after, watching snow fall and feeling like she'd just made either the smartest decision of her life or the biggest mistake. 6 months later, Betty stood in a new kitchen in a new town, making breakfast, while Jacob chattered about his new school. Her mother hummed Christmas carols despite it being June. Everything was peaceful, safe, normal. Exactly what she'd wanted. The doorbell rang. "I'll get it." Jacob raced for the door. "Wait!" Betty's protective instincts flared, but her mother was already there, opening the door with Jacob bouncing beside her. A delivery man stood on the porch, holding a single red rose and an envelope. "Delivery for Betty Ford," he said. Betty's heart stopped. She took the envelope with trembling hands, opened it. Inside was a single Christmas dinner ticket for that evening at the Grand Belmont Hotel, and a note in elegant handwriting. "I told you I'd handle the rest. The Morellis and Volkov are gone. The FBI closed their investigation. You're free, Betty. No more running. No more hiding. If you want normal, keep the life you've built. You've earned it. But if you want extraordinary, if you want danger and passion and a man who'll spend his life making sure you never feel invisible again, meet me at table 12, Christmas in June. Our table. The choice is yours, Mowgli Mia. G." Betty stared at the note, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Mom?" Jacob tugged her sleeve. "What is it?" She looked down at her son, safe, happy, thriving in their new normal life. Then at her mother, who was watching her with knowing eyes. "You should go," her mother said quietly. "I'll watch Jacob." "Mom, I can't just—" "Yes, you can," her mother smiled. "Betty, I've watched you survive for 5 years. Maybe it's time you learn to live." Betty looked at the Christmas ticket again. At the rose. At the promise of something more than safe and normal. She thought of Gilberto's eyes in the darkness. His hand steady on her back. The way he'd said her name like it was sacred. "Just for dinner," she heard herself say. "Just to talk." But they both knew it was a lie. Because, as Betty grabbed her coat and kissed Jacob goodbye, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, not since a stranger asked her to dance at a Christmas dinner and changed her entire world. She felt alive. And this time, she was choosing it. Did this Mafia Christmas story give you chills? If yes, hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on thrilling Mafia romance stories that will keep you at the edge of your seats.